Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Patrice McCarthy, who is with CABE, and Leonard Lockhart, who is also a member of CABE. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How are we tonight?
We are well.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for coming down. So, Leonard, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with CABE?
Well, thank you for having me here. My name is Leonard Lockhart. I'm currently on the Windsor Board of Education.
Okay.
Been serving since January of 2012. I am currently the president of CABE.
Okay.
And I've served in previous leadership positions throughout CABE. And also, as a member of CABE, I serve as a director on the National School Board Association as well.
Really?
Yes, sir.
What does that entail?
That entails representing the whole East Coast as a director on the National School Board Association to really advocate for high quality public education for everybody at the federal level as NSBA, and I advocate at the CABE level, at the state level for the same.
Wow. Bet it keeps you busy.
One of my few hobbies, yes, sir.
And Patrice, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am honored to serve as CABE's Executive Director and General Counsel.
Okay.
I've spent most of my professional career at CABE in a variety of positions, and my focus is always on helping boards of education be as effective as they can in meeting the needs of their students. And that includes things like supporting them in the policy area, helping them advocate at the state and federal level, and also providing them legal guidance.
Now, what exactly, I know we just touched on it briefly, but what exactly do you guys do at CABE? What is CABE?
We are a nonprofit membership organization.
Okay.
And we provide education, advocacy, and support. So we provide a great deal of professional development for school board members. Both, we do that at the local level, working with individual boards of education, as well as statewide and regional conferences. We provide publications, we provide guidance in the areas of policy and governance, as well as legal issues.
And that's all for all 169 towns and cities in the state.
And there are actually 167 school boards in the state because some districts are regionalized.
Boy, was I wrong. Okay.
No? Okay. You were very close.
I didn't know there were 167.
And then there are also charter schools in Connecticut as well.
Very nice. And as far as when we're taping this very soon, the Connecticut State Legislature is going to open up their session, I believe, on Wednesday. And obviously you guys are going to be up at the Capitol most of the session.
Correct.
Absolutely. We were actually up there today.
You were?
Yes. We actually had a meeting with the office of the House Minority Leader.
Okay.
And we were discussing the CABE priorities and some of the things that the over 1,400 board members within the state of Connecticut would like to see done in a very nonpartisan fashion. One of the things we want to do is educational cost sharing, called ECS.
Okay.
We want to make sure that that formula is looked at again. The formula is very aged. There's been some funds added to that formula over the years, but the actual adequacy of that funding taking care of districts, whether they're urban, suburban, or rural, has not met the need of some of our districts, especially those in the rural and urban environment. And even those that are suburban, which have the perceived ability to pay, they don't get their fair share of the funding either, so it's not correct. Okay. So we have to find an equitable way to make sure that every single child, which is over 512,000 children that we represent in the state of Connecticut, that every district has a fair opportunity to give their children the opportunity to have a successful educational process.
And obviously that entails a lot, especially with what's going on in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, but it's also, we also think that politics are local, and we want to make sure that education, even though it's a constitutional mandate by the state of Connecticut, we are agents of the state, but we advocate for the fact that we want local control, especially of policy and curriculum at the local level. Right. But we also understand as Board of Ed members, we advocate for the funds. We may create the budget and approve the budget, but we have to go through the tax authorities as well as advocate for money from state and federal sources as well as grants to make it work. So we could have the best plan in the world, but The advocacy piece comes in when we have to go and sell the budget to the taxpayers
Right.
and actually try to get the funding.
Exactly, and that's probably very hard from time to time, depending on the city or town that you're dealing with.
That is correct.
And Patrice, you have something you'd like to add?
Well, I think what's really critical is that our school board members have the opportunity to communicate with their legislators.
Right.
Because it's very important that legislators understand how the decisions they are making, how individual pieces of legislation will impact the education in their local communities. Everyone has the same goal. We want quality education for students. How we get there might be differences of opinion. And understanding that impact, the unintended consequences in some cases of legislation that might be well-intentioned, but might limit the ability of a local board of education and their administration to set the priorities for that community. So that's why that two-way communication is critical.
And to piggyback on that,
Yes.
the decisions, for example, I live in Windsor.
Okay.
I can make a lot of decisions for the town of Windsor, but also by my oath and per the constitutional mandate, I'm responsible for all the children in the state of Connecticut. So I may be making decisions that might be detrimental to another school district, especially if it's an area of funding
Yep.
or a request that might hurt another district. So I have to be mindful that it might set a precedent for some other district that they may not even want to partake in. So all school boards are responsible for their own little areas, but at the same time, as a collective group, we have to be very mindful that we are all working together
Right.
to make sure we educate every single child in the state of Connecticut.
Patrice?
Well, it's just an exciting time, I think, in public education
Yeah.
because we know there are significant needs, but we also have a lot of community engagement. We have 1,400 volunteers who serve on our school boards in Connecticut.
Okay.
And unlike other states, none of our school board members can be compensated by state statute. So they are purely volunteers in this role. And they represent the will of their community. And by their advocacy, by their participation in local policy making, they're making a real difference for our students.
I did not know that. You just taught me something.
We are in the education business.
Yes, exactly. Right. Right. And what are you guys looking to accomplish during this legislative session?
You want to start?
You can start.
All right. Funding is clearly at the top of the list.
Okay.
This is the long legislative session, so the legislature has to adopt the biennial state budget.
Right.
Education funding needs to be a priority. Leonard has already talked about the importance of re-examining the ECS formula and making sure that it can adequately reflect the increased costs throughout the education system. There's also a real focus on special education costs.
Right.
And we know that those are important in order to meet the needs of our most vulnerable students, but we need the state to be a better partner in shouldering some of those extraordinary costs.
Also, what we would like to do is focus on recruitment and retention of teachers,
Okay.
especially in the area of diversity. We also understand that to have a diverse workforce, we understand that there's pockets of the state that may have different perceptions to that particular type of a workforce.
Sure.
For example, I was raised up in the Hartford Public Schools. It's an urban area, but if you go to an area where it's farming, for example,
Right.
they're two totally different perspectives, and the ability to recruit minority teachers might be very, very difficult. And then if you're able to recruit them, the ability to maintain them and retain them can be very difficult. We're also looking at it from a viewpoint where a teacher at any district, any teacher that works in a district should be able to live within that district.
Right.
And so we're looking at it from an angle of how do we support them through legislation, whether it's through the housing committee or through any type of committee that can help bring new staff members into the state, set them up with professional development, tie them into districts where they are able to provide the services that those districts need, and to be able to retain them. Teaching is a very, very difficult profession. As a Board of Ed member, we do not have direct control over the teachers. That is the job of the superintendent.
Right.
All we are doing is macro managing the school district. We don't micromanage like the superintendent.
No.
But we have a true interest to make sure that we have qualified personnel in front of our students that look like our students to make sure that they are delivering the curriculum as designed and approved by the board, and to make sure that we can fairly assess not only the staff, but the teachers to make sure that everything is working well.
I think another area that we really have to look at is supporting our students in terms of their social emotional well-being.
Okay.
We know that the pandemic exacerbated some of those issues for our students. Our youngest students didn't have the chance before they entered kindergarten, for example, to have preschool experiences, to have story time at the library. That wasn't an option. That inability to develop some of those social skills, we now see impacting their educational experience.
Right.
We also know that our older students suffer from the isolation still that they experienced during the pandemic. So there was always a social emotional component that we needed to address, but it has definitely been exacerbated, and we know there are not enough professionals available to meet the needs of particularly our youngest students. So that's another pipeline issue where we need to make sure that we're developing career opportunities for counselors, school psychologists, but also have the resources to make them available.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And finally is, as I stated earlier, we're advocating to make sure that boards of education locally have control over policy and curriculum over their district. Even though we are agents of the state, we are elected by our local electorate
Right.
for the sole responsibility of managing that school district. And we want to make sure that any profile of a graduate for that said district, for example, that they want a profile where it can be farming, or it can be down in the southeast part of the state where you want people prepared to work at the shipyard. You want to make sure you create a workforce and prepare them with the skills, starting with elementary school, working through the middle school, working through the high school, so that when they turn 18, that profile of the graduate is prepared to either go into the military, prepared to grab a blue-collar job with the ability to go grab licensure through the state of Connecticut and a trade, or if they want to go to college and then come back. The main thing we want to do is create a workforce that one will go and attain the skills that your local area needs, and then they will come back to the area that which they were reared, and then apply those skills and reinvest back into the community that they came from. That's the key idea of what we would like to see happen, but we have to make sure we allow local boards, as long as they follow state and federal laws and local ordinances, that they're able to have that control and execute as they see fit.
Please.
Well, we also have to always be vigilant about education mandates that may come from the legislature.
Yes.
And the good news is that the legislature really has focused on those issues in the past several years. They formed a working group that CABE was actually responsible for convening to look at professional development mandates. And because there's a limited amount of time in any school year for educators to engage in professional development.
Right.
And if so much of it is prescribed at the state level and is repetitious year after year, these are adult learners, and we firmly believe that they'll retain knowledge from one year to the next. If we don't make some changes in that area, we limit the opportunity for the local district to say, this is what we really need this year for our professional development for our staff. This is what we need to focus on.
Right.
So they have reduced some of those professional development mandates, and they also have now formed an Education Mandates Council that is an ongoing body that is responsible for reviewing any proposed mandates that are presented in the legislature and providing input on them, as well as continuing to look at existing mandates and make recommendations about what might be modified.
Now, I'm sure you both know that when the pandemic hit, schooling, everything was virtual, Zoom meetings, and I'm sure you're glad that you're actually back in the classroom. The kids are back in the classroom.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference for educators as well as for students.
Yeah. I was going to say, doing class through Zoom was probably not Not as much fun as people think.
There's certainly, for business meetings, I understand the convenience factor, but even in that context, you lose that social interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Those informal conversations that are not on the meeting agenda.
Exactly.
And the same thing is true in the educational environment.
And especially in that area where you have, we had a 4-year period where there was some, between the beginning of the pandemic and then getting back to full speed with schools again.
Yep.
You've had some children that their beginning of their educational career was spent at home.
Right.
And when we talk about the social emotional learning and the needs of helping these students, we have to be mindful of the fact that we are aware that if the children don't have those foundational skills by the 3rd grade, statistically it is proven that they will struggle academically for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So we have a class of students right now throughout the state and the country, for that matter, that are really, really going to need those extra supports. And we know that it's coming, and we have to be mindful of that, and that the data may suggest maybe a blip as they move through the system, but we also know that we have to take care of those students. So when we're advocating for these things, we don't want to forget that the pandemic was here. We are clearly coming out of the pandemic,
Right.
but the unintended consequences of the pandemic and the end results of it are still lingering and may be with us maybe for a generation. We don't know that, but what we have to do is be ethical in our thinking and be very, very proactive rather than reactive, and making sure that we're providing for every single child, not only the children, but the staff. The staff, the administrators, they've all gone through a lot. And we truly appreciate, as CABE, we truly appreciate everything that they've done for our kids. And we appreciate the state legislature, CJ, for everything they've done to help us get through this phase. But it is a phase, but we know now we have to get to the next step. And how do we make sure that we preserve the gains that we have,
Right.
and to make sure that we keep making sure we provide the adequate services without having anyone, quote unquote, fall behind.
Right. Now, let's talk about the funding for special education and how important that is.
It's critical because the rights of children with special needs are protected by both Connecticut law as well as federal law. And all boards of education realize that they have that obligation and a moral commitment to all students.
Okay.
The challenge is that some of those costs are very high. If a child has multiple needs and has to be put in a private out-of-district placement, there's the cost of the placement, there's the cost of the transportation to
Right.
that placement, and that impacts the rest of the local budget.
Right.
So making sure that both the federal government and the state government make meaningful contributions to support those needs, which should cross all boundaries.
Yep.
We know that the federal government had made a commitment originally to support 40% of the costs.
Okay.
However, that has never been achieved. The highest it's gotten is around 15 or 16%. And because the distribution of that money is based on the wealth of a state, Connecticut only receives about 7 or 8%.
Right.
Our congressional delegation understands this fully. They are fully supportive of the federal government meeting that commitment, but it has not been possible to achieve that in Congress.
Again, it goes with the ability to perceive, the ability to pay.
Yep.
Yeah, we may have the ability to pay, but again, our students deserve access to those funds just like any other student in the country. And just like here in the state has done a good job in trying to provide as much funding as possible. But when it comes down to the tier 2, tier 3 services that a district may not be large enough to take on and outplace,
Right.
1 or 2 new students coming into your district can really create havoc within a small district's budget. But adversely, if you're in an urban area and you have a larger volume of these cases,
Right.
it also can be the same catastrophic effect. Now, if you have a suburban district that had the perceived ability to pay, it still can be regressive across the board because now we're paying for those services through what? Our property taxes and the regressive car tax. So at the end of the day, trying to find funding and to ethically provide the services without skirting the budget, that's the key piece. You got to make sure the services are provided, but you got to make sure you put the qualified people in front of the kids as well.
Right.
And that's where you now have to make a choice. Do I cut a math teacher or do I hire another special ed specialist? Because we just don't have the money. I'm using that as an example,
Right.
but at the end of the day, these are difficult decisions that Board of Eds have to make with their superintendents to make sure that we are not violating federal law, because
Right.
no school district wants to be in that situation.
No.
But I'm sure there's school districts that have heavy caseloads,
Right.
and they're trying to keep them in-house to make sure that they save money. And you probably got teachers that have large caseloads. And everyone knows that that's the case. And we're trying to find professionals, have people go to school, train them, bring them to Connecticut, and put them in front of our kids that are qualified to actually do the work.
One of the things that we're looking at are incentives to help boards of education who might want to work with other boards nearby
Okay.
to develop some in-house programs. Now, often there's a startup cost associated with that that would be too burdensome for an individual district to support.
Right.
But if there were state funds available, that way those programs could be developed. Those districts would not necessarily have to send as many students to private placements, and the transportation costs would be lower, and the students would be better served because they would be educated at least closer to their home district.
And I'm sure the transportation costs vary, but from town to town or city to city.
Right.
That's correct.
And in some cases, it's significant distance in order to get to an appropriate placement for the
Right.
child, and no one wants their child on a bus for an hour and a half each way.
No, absolutely not. Now, I saw something on the news the other day that one of the towns is actually telling their students no cell phones during the day.
That is an issue
No cell phone?
during the day. No cell phones in school, basically.
Absolutely. So that's a district by district
Yep.
policy.
Okay.
I know the governor has been very firm about this particular piece.
Okay.
There are some school districts that are of the belief that, hey, in the middle school, no phones at all, because they don't feel that they're responsible enough to actually handle a phone out during the course of a day.
Right.
But there are some school districts that believe, hey, at the high school level, we are here to teach you skills and to help teach you responsibilities,
Right.
and to give you some leeway and leverage.
Right.
For example, hey, a school district could be like, you can have your phone during lunch, for
Okay.
example. But if you have it out in the academic environment, it's an automatic grab. You get it back at the end of the day. If you have it out again, now it's a grab, and your parent have to come and get it from you. So it could be those type of examples.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, when we're out in the real world, in professional environments, whether it's military or the workforce, there are rules and regulations and safety procedures you must follow.
Oh, yeah.
And in order for you to learn that responsibility and to learn how to engage with authority, I believe high schools working with students and parents with the cell phone policies and stuff, no matter how strict or lenient it may be, as long as the expectations are fairly laid out by that school district, parents are understanding of those rules and regulations,
Right.
the kids understand, and that as long as it's being enforced in a very, very objective manner instead of subjective, you could be very, very successful, and the kids will gravitate to the policy quite well.
And we actually worked with the state, our staff worked with the State Department of Education to develop
Oh, yeah?
a model policy around cell phone use. And it makes a distinction between elementary, middle, and high school access to cell phones during the
Okay.
school day. But a key component is what Leonard said, that the policy be developed within the community, that it be vetted within the community, including students, educators, and parents, so that there is widespread understanding of the goals of the policy and the expectations.
Yes.
Would you guys mind sticking around for another segment?
Absolutely, we'd
All right.
be happy to.
It'd be our pleasure.
We'll be right back.
Vacation rental cons top the list of travel scams reported to Better Business Bureau. Con artists often pretend to own these rentals and try to talk you into paying them directly instead of through a travel company. It may be tempting because scammers will offer a cheaper deal, but the last thing you want to do after taking time off of work and paying for airfare is to get to your destination and learn the home you plan to rent doesn't even exist. Do extra research before buying into an ad you see on social media or online. The free cruise is also a common con. Read the fine print and watch out for add-on fees, taxes, and other charges. And finally, beware of third-party booking sites that claim to sell airfare. You pay with a credit card and then receive a call from the company asking you to verify personal information such as your bank account. In other cases, you're told your flight was canceled and convinced to fork over more money to rebook. To see the full list of vacation scams and how to avoid them, visit bbb.org/travel. And to report a scam, visit bbb.org/scam tracker.
Here we go. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti, sitting here with Patrice McCarthy and Leonard from CABE. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. So in the first segment, we talked about all sorts of other stuff going on with the legislative session. I'm going to actually save the report of the 119K Commission till later, because that's going to be a good ending of the show. Let's talk about the recruitment and retention of diversity educators workforce.
All right. So you have superintendents that are really, really engaged in this work.
Okay.
It starts from a community-based conversation of what type of staff would you like in front of your kids? And the kids also will tell you exactly who they would like to see.
Right.
We live in a day and age in the 2024, 2025 where people are seeing people that resemble them for the first time, maybe at the middle school or high school.
Right.
And that's kind of disappointing. You kind of want a staff in any public service arena to look like their community, whether it's the police department, fire department, the education, the school system. Kids relate to who they are, and they try to find that through their educational process. They try to find that through reading. So when you try to find staff members, it's not a lot of people, unfortunately, this day and age, are going into the education profession. It's a very, very rewarding profession, but it's a very difficult profession where these individuals wear their hearts on their sleeves, whether they're the teachers, whether they're the paraprofessionals, whether they're the janitors, whether they're the nurse.
Right.
Every single person that is part of the education system is part of the upbringing and education of that child, because you want, when you walk into a building, that it's very, very inclusive, it's reflective that it's a school,
Right.
it's a school that you're proud of, it's safe, it's clean, and you want staff members that want to be there.
Yeah.
That's a culture. So it definitely starts, I believe, from the Board of Education, setting the standard, setting the expectation, working through the superintendent, and really, really supporting the superintendent, whether it's through policies, whether it's through budgeting, whether through supportive programs, to make sure that the environment and the culture you wish to execute your curriculum is in place.
Yeah, and we have a number of examples in Connecticut of successful programs to recruit a diverse educator population.
Okay.
Those would benefit from additional support so that they could be expanded. So for example, there are programs that expose middle and high school students to the possibility of teaching as a career. Again, if you've never seen anyone that looks like you leading your classroom, you're much less likely to think, gee, that might be a profession that I would want to consider.
Right.
There are also programs that help the paraprofessionals in our buildings who may have some college experience but don't have educator certification, help them become certified. Those are the individuals that are going to stay in those schools. They're not going to move to another district.
No, of course
that
not.
They are invested in those schools, and giving them the opportunity will enhance our educator workforce and also addresses the retention issue.
Now, when we talk about diversity, we also have to understand that the educational system, since its foundation, when it began, it was a male profession. When the country became industrialized and males went into the factories and went to work, it became a female teaching, became a female, perceived female profession.
Okay.
Now that you fast forward to where we are now, that perception, sadly, is still in place. But it's with the understanding that anyone can be a teacher. Anyone can be able to gravitate to being able to say, look, I love the children. If you can't serve the people unless you love the people.
Right.
And when you are a teacher, you are going in there with everything you got.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is defeat any type of negative stereotypes about what a teacher is, what an administrator is, what a janitor looks like, what a nurse looks like. If we can tear down all of those preconceptions and say, look, we want the best nurse here in front of our children.
Right.
We want the best science teacher here in front of our children.
Exactly.
We want the best calculus teacher here in front of our children. And if you're intentional with that recruitment, there's a lot of bright students and kids out there, but we have to encourage them to want to teach the kids. And right now, based off of the environment of schools at times, sometimes teachers are going like, it's difficult. Do I really want to do that in this day and age? So it's very difficult, but it's a rewarding profession. I'm married to a teacher, and let me tell you, she's very exhausted Monday through Friday, but she's given her all, and she's very happy at the end of the day because she gave her all. She feels her students got a little bit better. Because when she hands her students off to the next teacher, she wants those kids prepared.
Oh, yeah.
So when you send your kids off, you don't want to hear a teacher saying good luck.
Yeah, right.
You want to hear a teacher saying do well.
Exactly.
Because you are prepared for the next level.
What does she teach?
She teaches Montessori. She teaches preschool Montessori.
All right.
So she got the 3 to 6 year olds.
Oh, fine.
And she has 26 of them.
Oh, great. Oh, that sounds like a fun job all day.
Yeah. All my children are Montessori educated, and they went to the middle school once they were done with the program, and they got in and they did very, very well.
Good. It's a good thing. All right, let's see. Support of students' mental health.
Yes. We know, we talked about the impact of the pandemic and how that has impacted the mental health of everyone, but particularly our youngest students who weren't exposed to those preschool experiences that they normally would have had. So socialization skills were lacking. That affects their mental and social well-being.
Right.
And then all of our students who have suffered from the isolation.
Okay.
So making sure that we have supports in place, and particularly if they're accessible in school, so that students are not having to wait for an appointment for 6 months with a mental health professional, because for someone having a mental health crisis, that's just unacceptable, but that's what we hear is not unusual for our young people. So that if a student is not feeling physically well and mentally well, they can't benefit from their educational experience.
Right.
So no matter how effective a teacher may be, they're not going to be able to get the full benefit of their education.
And we want to make sure we're very clear. We're concerned about the students, but we're also concerned about our staff.
Oh, yeah.
Because it goes both ways. If an adult is not well and they're struggling, and we want to make sure that services are in place for everyone, because at the end of the day, it's a collective group coming together to support our kids. Because the kids are going to emulate what they see, and they're very visual creatures. And they're going to really, really gravitate to the mood and the energy of those that are in front of them. So we have to make sure that our teachers and staff as well.
And talking about students emulate what they see, one of the issues that we addressed starting probably 8 years ago is the issue of civility at all levels of government. And we actually adopted a resolution in Connecticut calling upon public officials at the local, state, and national level to demonstrate civility in their interactions. And our national association adopted then the same resolution at our urging. Because we know that when within a public body, whether it be the legislature, the town council, the Board of Education, if the adults are not able to work together collaboratively and effectively and treat each other with civility and respect and listen to the views of others, first of all, they're not going to be that effective in accomplishing their goals, but also they are setting a terrible example for the young people in our communities.
Patrice, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I believe in civility and collaboration. I also believe when you are around the table, there's no minority or majority. There's a group of people that's been elected to do a job.
Right.
And to not listen to the faintest cry or the minority voice is unacceptable, in my opinion. It doesn't matter who's in the minority or majority. At the end of the day, when we're in these positions, we're here for a season, and it's our job to make sure that we work together collaboratively on behalf of all of our children.
Right.
Doesn't matter who voted for you, who doesn't like you, it does not matter. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
if something's before you, we are responsible for making sure we educate every single child. We are responsible for supporting that one superintendent to take care of every single staff member. And we are held accountable by every single member of our electorate,
Right.
whether they voted for you or not. So we have a moral responsibility to make sure that we work within our towns to make sure we understand exactly what they want from us and what the desires of the town, and if it's morally and ethically and legal,
Right.
you have a responsibility to go and to execute to the best of your ability. But it takes someone to be able to say, I was wrong. You were absolutely correct. I did not know that. But in today's environment where tribalism is alive and well, sadly, you don't get a lot of that. You have more control of government at your local level than people can even imagine. Trying to get that level of collaboration at the federal level is almost impossible right now. I believe there's a lot more civility and collaboration at our state level than more people will give us credit for.
Right.
But definitely at the federal level, it's not the model that we would like to look after, no matter who's in the majority. At the end of the day, we have to make sure, because the kids are watching, the community is watching, the superintendent is watching, more importantly, the staff is watching. Because if the staff sees the Board of Education not functioning in a proper place and being mindful of their duties, that's how you lose or gain staff members. It starts at the top. The board is at the top.
Please.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think that's a good summary, Leonard.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So now we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. The report of the 119K Commission.
Yes, sir.
And you and I have a mutual friend.
We do.
We do, and we should probably mention our mutual friend. And I'll let you do that one.
All right. Well, Joe DeLong is my counterpart. He's the executive director of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. I actually began my career at CCM, but that was long before Joe was the executive director there.
Really?
But this began with the work of the Dalio Foundation,
Yes.
which they commissioned a study to look at disengaged youth in Connecticut. And they looked at the age span from age 14 to 26.
Okay.
So some of the individuals that they identified as disengaged had already graduated from high school, but were not engaged in meaningful employment or in higher education.
Yeah.
And others were still in school, but perhaps not attending school on a regular basis.
Okay.
As a result of that report, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities formed the 119K Commission to make recommendations to address this disengagement. And the recommendations are broad. I think there are 22 recommendations with 4 or 5 sub-recommendations under each one. You've looked at the report.
I've seen the report.
You
yes.
know how lengthy it is.
Yes.
They engaged, the 119K Commission, to their credit, engaged in a process where they had public sessions around the state over the course of 6 months.
Right.
And Leonard was actually one of the invited speakers at one of those sessions to talk about recommendations from the field, recommendations from young people, recommendations from community members, school board members, parents, from business leaders, so that they did develop a comprehensive set of recommendations. Do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, so I was invited to the session in Meriden.
Okay.
And I was there representing school board members in my capacity as president of CAPE.
All right.
And it was good to be able to speak in front of the commissioners, because many of them were mayors or heads of their local governments.
Right.
And so I was able to articulate to them from our perspective why we felt this was a very important conversation that we've been looking forward to.
Right.
Because we've been advocating, all 1,400 board members plus, we advocate on an annual basis for budgets.
Right.
And too often in all of our communities, I don't think there's not one community I don't know of where every time you go to ask for something, it's cut. The first thing that's cut is Board of Education funding. Why are the teachers making so much? Why are we spending this? So we have to understand that a lot of the recommendations and a lot of the outcomes that were discovered, it was due to the fact that maybe there was some funding issues or lack of resources within town government or town services, where a child may have slipped through the cracks, or there were no services and they were not aware of them. But from an education standpoint, I made it very clear that as Board of Ed members, it's our job not to submit to the mayor or the town manager. It's our job to advocate an ethical, responsible budget presented to us by a superintendent that is telling us, this is what I need to do my job. If you would like for me to improve services and provide mental health supports and provide these type of services and increase the scores, we need this. I know individuals are tired that it's about funding. What return of our funding are we getting, return on our investment we're getting now? That's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you're not providing the full funding and you're constantly cutting, yeah, you're providing funding, but we're telling you up front, without the full funding we're requesting, it's going to be a struggle to get to where we need to go. So I believe the mayors, they heard that from me loud and clear. They probably didn't like the way I expressed it to them, but at the end of the day, I was expressing on behalf of all the board members. It was a great experience. They questioned us about an hour and a half. And they really took to heart and really engaged CABE. All of our board members was invited to provide written testimony. They presented to our board of directors meeting. I invited them several times to our meetings, and we were in constant contact with the foundation at least once a month, getting updates about what's going on, how it looked from the education side, with the understanding it wasn't all about education. It was about the holistic picture of what can we do to stop it early so that we can have the ounce of prevention rather than the pound of cure at the end.
Exactly.
And I mean, the report is very broad ranging. It addresses housing instability, for example, because when you look at student attendance, it's the lack of stable housing that is very often at the root of the failure to attend school, or the fact that young people need to work to help support their families. And so school becomes, unfortunately, a lower priority in those families. So making sure that there is that broad infrastructure of support for our young people and their families is really, I think, the takeaway from the report.
When we talk about supports, Patrice, I want to just piggyback. A basic necessity that a lot of us take for granted is food. We have children that the only time they eat is when they come to school, breakfast and lunch. And there's districts that have programs where a student is able discreetly, if they have family resource centers within their districts, that they're able to take a backpack home that looks like any normal backpack, but it has food for that children and their family for an evening, and maybe some toiletries, and then they bring that book bag back. There's several districts, I know my district does that, but hunger is a huge thing in the state of Connecticut, and we have always advocated that every single child should have free breakfast and free lunch. Even during the pandemic, we had families that, even with the ability to pay, were struggling to make ends meet. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility. There should not be one hungry child. Not one hungry veteran, not one hungry citizen should be going hungry. So when you got children of all races, creeds, eating and happy to eat, it can be at times low quality food. It's not a 5-star restaurant, but when you're getting breakfast and you're getting lunch, now you're able to focus in class. Because when you're hungry, first thing you're going to do is what? Be upset.
Yeah.
Your head's going to be down. You're not going to be part of the process.
And you can't focus.
And you can't focus. So that's something as Board of Education members, we really, really try to address the food insecurities as well. And that's one of the things that was also focused in the report as well that I want to highlight.
Wow. Patrice? So,
I just think that this is an opportunity to engage the legislature as well as the broader community around what impacts the education of our young people. That it's not just quality facilities that are healthy in terms of indoor air quality. It's not just special education programs that are targeted to meet individual needs. It's not just school to career opportunities. It's not just advanced level academic courses for students that want to engage in them, but that there really has to be that infrastructure in place, or else those other things are not going to have the impact that we want to see for our students.
right. Now, let's talk about school safety and security.
Hey, well, we know that's a huge topic across this country.
Oh, yeah.
Board of Ed members are afforded an opportunity to really understand what the school safety plan is. Those plans are shared with board members in executive session. Those are not shared with the public for obvious reasons, because you do not want that to be public and then you can be set up for fail.
Exactly.
But that's something that has to be done on an annual basis by every single board. It definitely should be presented in unison with your town government as well as the chiefs of your emergency services, where they are prepared to engage in any type of situation. As a fire officer in my town, it's very important that we know what's going on in all of our public buildings,
Oh, yeah.
how to access those buildings, how to keep a hot zone, how to keep people away, how to provide the mutual aid services to react to situations.
Right.
Every single town, every single police chief, every single fire chief, every single EMS chief take those responsibilities very, very seriously,
Right.
and in consultation with the school superintendent, because we're responsible for every single soul that comes on upon our campus.
Oh, yeah.
And we are very mindful that we cannot be complacent, and we have to make sure that we take care of every single body as safely as possible. There are some districts that believe in SROs, which is safety resource officers,
Yep.
which is the police department. And there's some towns that don't believe in it, and there's some towns that believe in it but just can't afford it. So it depends on the risk level that's been assessed by your respective town,
Right.
and the community coming together saying this is something that we want to get behind. But as far as Board of Ed members, yes, we are all advised of our school plans, but it's done in executive session, and whatever is said in executive session should stay right there legally in executive session.
And I think what the important thing is that school districts communicate, particularly to their parent community,
Right.
that these policies and procedures are in place and that there is this robust coordination and communication
Okay.
between the school district and the other officials in the community. Because I think that is what will help the public understand that while they can't know the details, that this is an issue that is taken very seriously.
And you know, sometimes when we have incidents, I think the important piece is that the community and parents want to know right away. And we also understand that the superintendent is never going to move as fast as a child in the situation with their cell phone, texting their parents. We understand that. But we also understand that we want our superintendent not sending a message just for the sake of sending one. We want our superintendent to be in front of the safety plan, making sure it's executed, and then when it's safely and humanly possible to give a credible initial update to what's going on in the most timely possible fashion. I think that's what we expect from our superintendent and our government officials. So racing to get something for the sake of getting something does not do any good.
No.
And equally important, racing to the scene. I'm a parent. I know if my child's in a situation, the first thing I would want to do as a parent is to race to the scene.
Right.
That does not help the situation. That actually makes the situation worse.
Yes.
Because you're now complicating a hot zone that the emergency services are trying to maintain. We just have to trust that the superintendent and those that we have asked to lead us in those areas are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and will be able to give you a timely update. But sometimes I do understand as a parent, you want to know right now.
Right.
And sometimes right now is just not possible based off of the execution of the safety plan.
Right.
And that, what Leonard just said, really highlights the role of the board and the superintendent as a governance team. So the superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day operations. The Board of Education has developed the policies that will apply to a host of circumstances, but then it's that trust between the board and the superintendent is critical.
Right.
Yep.
Now, let's see. How about we talk about civility at all levels of government?
Well, it certainly is a goal that we should all aspire to.
Yes.
It can be very difficult.
Okay.
In order to serve, I've always stated, you shall decrease in yourself to increase in others.
Okay.
So I have my own biases, I have my own opinions,
Right.
but when I sit in this chair as CABE president, when I sit in my chair as Windsor Board of Education, my biases and my prejudices have to be set to the side.
Yes.
And I have to come together as a collective governance.
Right.
As I mentioned before, I don't think we see that at the federal level.
No.
I think we see a lot of everyone get in line. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way our government is set up. So again, I'll just restate again, local politics is where you can get a lot of things done for your community. So being able to talk to someone that, quite frankly, you know you don't like, and you know they don't like you. And that's okay.
Right.
That's actually okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have a debate. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a 5-4 vote.
Right.
What's not okay is for me not to respect your point of view and you not respect mine. I don't have to agree with it. And when you are speaking, I'm responsible for giving you my undivided attention. Because as a board member, you've earned that respect by being elected to the seat.
Right.
And it's fair for me to expect that in return.
Right.
A lot of times that don't happen. The only way you can get that culture in place is that you exhibit the behaviors you want seen done on your board,
Right.
even if it's not exuded back to you. I've been part of where I've been talked over, ignored, the whole thing. I come from a culture where, being a minority, people didn't listen to me
Okay.
just because of who I am.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's okay, because I still have a job to make sure that I come to you, articulate on behalf of who I'm representing, and then I have a responsibility to say, how do you feel about that, and what would you like me to do?
Right.
With a smile, not with me pointing my finger at you.
Right.
Because when you point finger at somebody, that's very demeaning, disrespectful. So it's all about body language.
Yeah.
It's all about being cheerful.
Absolutely.
And actually really understanding what your role is and why you're there. Because at the end of the day, the people have the authority through constitutions to seat you in these positions.
Right.
So we represent the public at the end of the day. They don't serve us, we serve them.
Right.
So we have a moral obligation to make sure that we talk to and listen to everybody. And trust me, all board members, we take a lot of heat.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
We take a
yeah.
lot of heat, but we signed up for that. And those that weren't properly told that was going to happen, they probably learned the hard way. But at the end of the day, if you ask to be elected, you ask for the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. And being civil, being respectful,
Oh, yeah.
and being collaborative is mandatory. And if that's not something that you're not willing to do,
Yeah, no.
public service is not for you.
Exactly. Being a public official is not easy.
Absolutely not.
If it was, everybody would be doing it.
Exactly. my mom was on the board of selectmen in Clinton for many, many years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of being son of an elected official. Of course, I still live in the town that she was on the board of selectmen went in, and growing up, I had to be very careful not to do anything stupid. Because
Well, at the end of the day, no matter what your political party is, we're humans.
Right,
At the end of the day, so we should be able to talk about anything.
Yeah.
It's okay to disagree. Hey, I think that point, I don't agree with it.
Right.
Even from my perspective or my understanding, I just don't agree.
Right.
And that's okay in government. But when the public comes to watch you commit your meetings in public, it should be a science.
Right.
It should be something where they're like, wow, they're actually handling the business of the town.
Right.
And they're actually being respectful to each other and being mindful to what we need done. That's the key goal of have civil and collaborative governing within your area.
Well, we're about to run out of time, but before we do, I want to thank you guys for coming down. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
That'd be
We
terrific.
got Patrice McCarthy and Leonard Lockhart from CABE. Thanks for some time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Patrice McCarthy and Leonard Lockhart, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night. We'll see you next time.